Hi, and welcome to English Channel. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
1. Introduction. Did you know that Cuba was once one of the richest sugar producers in the world? Sugar made the island very wealthy, but most Cuban people were poor and had little freedom. They worked hard, but the wealth was not for them. So how did this happen? In this video, we will learn the history of Cuba, from the first people on the island to modern times, and see how wealth, power, and struggle shaped the lives of its people. 2. Cuba before Europeans. Long before Europeans came, Cuba was home to the Taino people. They came from South America many years ago. They traveled by small boats and settled on the island. The Taino lived close to nature. They grew crops like cassava and corn. They also hunted animals and caught fish from the sea. Food was shared, and people helped each other. They lived in simple houses made of wood and leaves. Each village had a leader, but life was mostly peaceful. The Taino believed in nature spirits and honored their gods through songs, dances, and stories. They made pottery, tools, and art by hand. The Taino did not have modern weapons. They did not build armies or fight large wars. Life was slow, simple, and balanced. For many years, the island of Cuba was quiet and safe. 3. The moment everything changed, the arrival of Columbus. One day in 1492, strange ships appeared on the sea near Cuba. They were bigger than anything the Taino people had ever seen. White sails moved slowly toward the island. The Taino stood on the shore and watched. Some felt curious. Others felt afraid. They did not know who these strangers were or why they came. The ships belonged to Christopher Columbus. He was an explorer sailing for Spain. He was looking for a new route to Asia. When he reached Cuba, he believed he had arrived in Asia. He did not know this land was a new world for Europeans. Columbus stepped onto the island and saw a beautiful place. The land was green and full of life. The sea was clear and the weather was warm. He wrote that Cuba was one of the most beautiful places he had ever seen. Soon, Columbus met the Taino people. They were friendly and peaceful. They shared food and helped the newcomers. They did not fight or run away. Columbus noticed something important. The Taino did not have guns or metal weapons. They lived simple lives. This made Columbus believe the island could be easily controlled. He claimed the land for Spain. This single moment changed Cuba forever. From that day on, Cuba was no longer isolated. New people, new ideas, and new dangers arrived. The peaceful life of the island would never be the same again. 4. Spanish colonization and the end of the Taino. In 1511, Spain officially made Cuba a colony. Spanish soldiers and settlers came to the island. They wanted land, gold, and power. The Spanish forced the Taino to work for them. They worked in farms and mines. The work was very hard, and the conditions were cruel. Many Taino were punished if they refused to obey. At the same time, new diseases arrived from Europe. The Taino had no protection against these illnesses. Many became sick and died quickly. Heavy labor and disease destroyed the Taino population. Within a few decades, most of them were gone. Their culture, language, and way of life almost disappeared. The Spanish also built new cities. One of the most important was Havana. It became a center for trade and ships. Spain now controlled Cuba, but the island paid a terrible price. 5. Sugar, slavery, and wealth. Over time, sugar became the most important product in Cuba. The island's land and climate were perfect for sugarcane. Large farms were built to grow and process sugar. Sugar brought great wealth to Cuba. Ships carried sugar to Europe and other parts of the world. The island became very valuable to Spain. But sugar needed many workers. After the Taino were gone, the Spanish brought enslaved Africans to Cuba. They were forced to work long hours in the fields. Life was painful and cruel for the slaves. The plantation owners became rich. They lived in large houses and had power. But most people on the island were poor. They worked hard but gained nothing. This created deep social inequality. A small group had wealth and control. The majority lived in suffering. Sugar made Cuba rich, but not its people. 6. Why sugar was so important. Sugar was one of the most desired products in the world. People in Europe loved sweet food and drinks. As demand grew, sugar became very valuable. Cuba had everything needed to produce sugar. The weather was warm. The soil was rich. Sugar cane grew fast and in large amounts. For plantation owners, sugar meant money and power. The more sugar they sold, the richer they became. They invested more land and more slaves into production. But sugar also brought great suffering. It depended on slavery and harsh labor. Workers had little rest and no freedom. Many died from exhaustion and disease. So sugar shaped Cuba's future. It brought wealth to a few and pain to many. This system of inequality would later lead to anger, resistance, and the fight for independence. 7. The fight for independence. The 10 Years' War and beyond. By the year 1868, many people in Cuba were tired of Spanish rule. They were poor, overworked, and had no political power. On sugar plantations, enslaved people suffered every day. Anger and hope began to grow across the island. In 1868, a man named Carlos Manuel de Céspedes took action. He owned land and slaves, but he made a brave choice. He freed his slaves and called on others to fight for independence. This event started the 10 Years' War. The war was long and difficult. Fighters used guerrilla tactics and moved through forests and hills. They had few weapons and little food. Many people lost their lives. After 10 years, the war ended without independence. Spain still controlled Cuba, but the fight changed the people forever. They learned how to resist and organize. Poor farmers, former slaves, and workers joined the cause. The idea of freedom spread across the island. Even though the war failed, the spirit of independence became stronger. Cuba was no longer silent. 8. Final war with Spain and U.S. involvement. In 1895, the fight for Cuba's independence began again. This time, the revolution had a clear voice and a strong vision. That voice was José Martí. José Martí was not a general or a soldier at first. He was a poet, a writer, and a thinker. He believed deeply in a free and fair Cuba. For Martí, independence was not only about removing Spain. It was about creating a nation with justice and dignity for all people. Martí spent many years in exile. From abroad, he organized the revolution. He wrote letters, gave speeches, and united Cubans of all races and classes. He believed that poor farmers, former slaves, and educated leaders must fight together. In 1895, Martí returned to Cuba to join the war. He wanted to fight alongside the people he inspired. Sadly, he was killed early in the conflict, but his ideas lived on. His words continued to guide the revolution. Cuban fighters used guerrilla warfare against the Spanish army. Spain responded with harsh control and violence. Many civilians suffered from hunger and disease. In 1898, the United States entered the war. After the explosion of the USS Maine in Havana, the U.S. blamed Spain. War was declared, and Spain was quickly defeated. Cuba gained independence from Spain, but the struggle was not truly over. A new power now stood close, ready to shape Cuba's future. 9. American influence and the Platt Amendment. After gaining independence from Spain, Cuba was not fully free. The United States had strong influence over the island. In 1901, a law called the Platt Amendment was added to Cuba's constitution. This law limited Cuba's independence. It allowed the United States to intervene in Cuban affairs. The U.S. could send troops if it believed Cuba was unstable. It also controlled parts of Cuba's economy and military. American companies invested heavily in sugar, land, and banks. They owned large areas of farmland. While some money entered the country, most profits left Cuba. Many Cuban people were unhappy. They felt their country was independent in name only. Poor farmers and workers saw little improvement in their lives. Protests and anger grew over time. People wanted real independence and control over their own future. Finally, in 1934, the Platt Amendment was ended. Cuba regained more control, but deep problems remained. 10. Dictatorship of Batista. In 1952, Fulgencio Batista took power in Cuba. He ruled the country as a dictator. Elections were stopped, and freedom of speech was limited. Batista's government was corrupt. Money and power stayed in the hands of a small group. Foreign companies continued to benefit. Many Cuban people lived in poverty. Police and the army used fear to control the population. People who spoke against the government were punished. Some were arrested or disappeared. Young people, students, and workers became angry. They wanted change and justice. Secret groups formed to fight the dictatorship. Cuba was moving toward another revolution. 11. The Cuban Revolution. Fidel Castro. One of the leaders of the resistance was Fidel Castro. He believed Batista's rule had to end. Along with other fighters, including Che Guevara, he began a revolution. At first, the rebels were weak. Many were captured or killed, but those who survived escaped to the mountains. There, they used guerrilla warfare to fight the army. The rebels gained support from poor farmers. They promised land and fairness. Slowly, their strength grew. By 1959, Batista had lost control. He fled the country. The revolution was successful. Fidel Castro took power and became the leader of Cuba. Many people celebrated and hoped for a better future. But new challenges were already beginning. 12. Communist Cuba and conflict with the U.S. After the revolution, Fidel Castro wanted to change Cuba completely. He believed socialism was the best way to help poor people. The government took control of land, factories, and businesses. This process was called nationalization. Large farms and sugar companies were taken from rich owners. Many of these businesses belonged to American companies. Castro said the wealth should belong to the Cuban people. Some Cubans supported these changes. They believed life would become fairer. The United States was very angry. American companies lost money and power in Cuba. In response, the U.S. placed an economic embargo on the island. This meant the United States stopped buying Cuban sugar. It also stopped selling many goods to Cuba. The embargo hurt Cuba's economy badly. Food, machines, and medicine became harder to get. Cuba needed a new ally. Castro turned to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union supported Cuba with money, oil, and weapons. In return, Cuba became a communist country and a close ally. In 1961, the conflict became violent. The United States supported an invasion called the Bay of Pigs. Cuban exiles trained by the U.S. landed on Cuba's coast. They hoped to overthrow Castro. The invasion failed quickly. Castro's forces defeated them. This victory made Castro stronger at home. Many Cubans saw him as a hero. 1 year later, the world faced a serious crisis. The Soviet Union placed nuclear missiles in Cuba. The United States discovered them. For 13 days, the world feared nuclear war. Finally, the missiles were removed. The United States promised not to invade Cuba. Cuba stayed communist and closely tied to the Soviet Union. 13. The special period: hope, hardship, and disappointment. For many years, the Soviet Union supported Cuba. It bought Cuban sugar at high prices. It sold oil and food at low prices. Life was difficult, but basic needs were met. Then in 1991, everything changed. The Soviet Union collapsed. Cuba suddenly lost its biggest supporter. The economy crashed. This time became known as the special period. There was not enough food. There was not enough electricity. Hospitals lacked medicine. Factories closed. Public transport stopped working. People walked or rode bicycles. They ate less and grew food in small gardens. Many families struggled to survive. The hope of the revolution slowly turned into disappointment. People believed the system would protect them, but now they felt forgotten and tired. Some Cubans left the country on small boats. Others stayed and endured. They learned to survive with very little. This period showed the real emotions of the Cuban people: pride mixed with pain, hope mixed with fear. Cuba survived, but it was deeply changed forever. 14. Modern Cuba, slow change. After the hardest years of the special period, Cuba slowly began to change. The government understood that the old system could not continue in the same way. People needed new opportunities to survive. Small economic reforms were introduced. Some people were allowed to start small private businesses. They opened cafes, goose houses, and small shops. These businesses helped families earn extra money. Tourism became very important. Visitors came to Cuba to see its history, music, and beaches. Old cities like Havana were repaired. Hotels, taxis, and restaurants created new jobs. However, life was still not easy. Salaries remained low. Many basic goods were still hard to find. People often depended on family abroad for support. Relations with the United States also began to change. For many years, the two countries had been enemies. But in the 2010s, talks between leaders started again. Embassies reopened. Travel became easier for a short time. Many Cubans felt hopeful. They believed change was finally coming. They wanted better lives without losing their identity. Even so, progress was slow. Some reforms stopped or were reversed. The embargo still affected daily life. Young people continued to leave the country in search of opportunity. Cuba remained a place of strong culture and resilience. Music, art, and community stayed alive. People adapted again, just as they always had. Closing thought: the history of Cuba is not finished. It is a story of hope, struggle, and survival. From the Taino people to modern times, Cuba has faced invasion, slavery, revolution, and hardship. Yet its people continue to endure. The story of Cuba is still being written, and the next chapter belongs to its people.
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.